Welcome to Short Stories with Julie. I am the aforementioned Julie, and today we are going to be reading a little bit of a winter story. And without further ado, let's get in. I am a writer, and I like to present these short stories that are my short stories that I've written, and simply just in another format, just to have people experience it. Frozen in time. It started with the wind, a cold, sharp breeze that could bite any bit of exposed skin. A wind that made the trees crack and the snow whip around in a frenzy. It grew, and soon darkness fell prematurely as dark clouds moved in. The snow whipping about was no longer the remnants of the last snowfall, but the icy chunks of the new, falling thick and furiously. It was the type of snowstorm you bought provisions for, locked up tight in your home. The type of storm that could last days, burying entire cities, closing down schools and workplaces, that kept families indoors, cuddled under warm blankets, having hot chocolate in their pajamas. Except this wasn't a city. This was a remote valley between nowhere and endlessness. On a clear day, as far as the eye could see, was wilderness, pure, untouched by man or civilization. Only the truly crazy ventured out here, and only the truly stupid did it alone. That was me. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself, hoping to give some warmth to my body and stop from shivering. I couldn't feel my hands or toes anymore. Trying to move them hurt like hell. Mother Nature was truly the sneakiest and harshest danger you could face when out. Only a few hours ago it had been a clear, sunny day. Now the thick clouds and blinding swirl of snow had blocked out the sun, making it difficult for me to get my bearings and get to safety. I stopped and tilted to the side, letting the snow slide off my backpack. I didn't need any more weight to carry. I had been walking in the growing storm for the past hour. My legs were tired, my shoulders were sore. It was hard to breathe properly with freezing cold air blowing in your face. My balaclava helped somewhat, but I was not in a good mood or paying any particular attention to where I was placing my feet. The loud crack beneath my feet startled me. The only sound had been the howling of the wind for so long. I figured it was the only sound I'd ever hear again. The accumulation of snow had hidden the frozen lake well, and my own limited senses had led me off my memorized route. I stopped and held my breath. The cracking diminished. I wasn't sure how far in I had gone, but it was always better to go back the way I had come in. The ice had held me up. That ice had held me up. I carefully took a step back and another. I sighed in relief. Then the ice cracked again, and I fell in. Everything stopped. The icy cold of the water seeped into every part of my warm clothing. I couldn't breathe or move. I had trained for this. I waited until my brain told my body to start working again. I kicked to the surface and took a painful breath. I curled up into a ball with my head out of the water, trying to conserve as much heat as possible. My parka was helping me float, but this was bad. Really bad. I took a chance and yelled out for help. Only silence answered me. My shivering stopped and my eyes started drifting closed. I shot them open. Sleeping cold was a very bad idea. No one was coming. I had to find a way out. I uncurled, grabbed the edge of the ice, and tried to pull myself up. My muscles were not cooperating, and my bag had gotten heavy with water. Without hesitation, I wormed my way out of my backpack, and pressing my feet on it, I gave a big push. It was the little bit I needed. I kept low to the ground, spreading myself out as much as possible to distribute my weight. Every inch was painful. My mind was foggy, and it was hard to think straight. All I could do was keep going forward. I was so tired, though. If only I could sleep for a moment. Then I could keep going after. No! The whole ordeal probably only took me a few minutes, but it felt like hours, and I knew I was in serious trouble if I didn't find some way to heat myself. I was going to die frozen here. I felt something solid in front of my hands. A tree. I had made it off the lake and to the edge of the forest. My breathing was slow. Everything was slow. I caught myself with my eyes closed and shook my head to wake up. Night had officially fallen. It was the pitch black of a starless sky. I wasn't moving forward in so much as I was stumbling from tree to tree. Finally, I saw a light up ahead. Was that a cabin? Some far, vague sense of rationality remembered that there were no cabins out here. I fell to the ground, unable to move on. My vision went black as I finally could have the blissful rest I had been waiting for. The first thing I felt was a slight tingling all over. Then, blessed heat. The scent of a wood-burning stove, something tasty cooking. Then the crackling of the fire nearby and a soft humming. I slowly opened my eyes. I was laying on the ground, facing near the fireplace, wrapped up in a heavy wool blanket. I realized in embarrassment that I was naked. Even being bundled up and so close to the fire, I shivered. There was a chill in my body that I wasn't sure would ever leave. I observed the room I was in, trying to move as little as possible. The entire interior was made of wood, except the fireplace that was made of stone. The room was small, but elegantly crafted. The wood was smoothed together, almost as if it had simply grown this way. I dared to turn around towards the humming. A squat old woman was bustling about an antique wood stove, cooking. She was smiling and hummed a haunting melody as she worked. Her hair was completely white, contrasting beautifully with her dark skin. She wore a colorful dress which gave me the impression of happiness. Her dark eyes met mine. She smiled wider. It was a warm smile, full of tenderness and welcome. "Ah, good, you are awake. Here, have some tea, dearie. It'll warm your insides. After you can have some potato pancakes and warm raspberry crisp." She set down a tray with said goodies on the side table and helped me up into the large chair nearby. I settled in comfortably, and she practically forced the hot teacup into my hands. "Drink it all up, dearie. It'll make you feel better." For a brief moment, alarm bells went off in my head. What if this woman was trying to drug me or poison me? I suspiciously looked into the brew, but it seemed like a normal enough cup of some herbal tea. I shook the notion away, knowing full well that if she wanted me harm, she could have done it easily while I was unconscious. I took a sip and immediately the heat worked its magic. The interminable chill slowly went away and my tense muscles began relaxing. My stomach grumbled and I didn't hesitate to scarf down my treats. It was a wonderful combination of salty starch and sweet fruitiness. Once satiated, I looked back to my host. She was sitting on the chair opposite me, still humming while she read a worn leather-bound book. As if sensing my eyes upon her, she looked up. "How was it, dearie?" "Very good, thanks." "Good, good. If you're wondering, your clothes are being dried near the stove. I'm sorry for doing so without permission, but they were soaked." "You saved my life. I would have frozen to death. Thank you." She looked sheepishly away. "'Twas nothing. You are practically on my doorstep." I was surprised. I thought I was hallucinating. I had been told there was no one living up here. Too isolated. "Some people like the isolation, or at least need it from time to time." "Well, I am glad you are here tonight. I don't know how to repay you." "No payment needed, but if someone ever needs a helping hand, you give it." She went back to her book and her humming. It didn't take long for my eyes to start drooping closed. Her sweet melody rocked me to sleep. When I woke up, my host was nowhere to be found in the small cabin, but my clothes were folded on the chair facing me, and there was more potatoes and crisp on the small table. I ate, got dressed, and used the washroom. My host still hadn't returned, but I wanted to see if I could get my bearings now that it was day. I braced for the cold as I opened the door, but it wasn't what I was expecting. Out of the door was a metal balcony, and I wasn't in a forest, but in some kind of city. Brightly colored tall buildings stood all around. It was strange and alien. Some of the buildings were shaped at impossible angles. Some were even rounded. There was some sort of foliage growing out of the sides of the buildings and on most of the roofs. I looked down, but couldn't see the ground. The building I was in was just as tall as the other ones surrounding it. To my left and right, I saw similar doors with numbers stamped in. 5032, 5030, and I was in 5031. It didn't make sense. There were some sort of crafts buzzing through the air, rushing from one building to the next. I stepped back inside and closed the door, breathing hard. I sat down in a daze. Just then, the door opened again. I rushed near the kitchen and grabbed a knife to defend myself. My host came in humming. She dropped what she was carrying. "There's no need for that, dearie. I know you must be confused. Let me explain." "Who are you and where am I?" She slumped her shoulders and sighed, closing the door behind her, giving the place the illusion of being a simple cabin in the woods once again. "'Tisn't a question of where, it's a question of when." The end. Thank you very much for listening to this story. If this is your first time and you enjoyed it, and if there's more stories, you can of course like, share, and subscribe. And you can check out my other short stories. This is a complete collection of short stories with Julie, so you can go check that out and check out my other short stories. And of course, if you really loved it and you'd like to be the first to see the new ones come out, these are actually short stories I offer for my newsletter on Patreon. So you can consider supporting me on Patreon and becoming a patron. Get a short story every month through my newsletter and also some book recommendations. So thank you very much once again and have a fabulous day.